If you use the scale as a metric for whether you're healthy or not, you're missing a lot. And I want to talk to you today about different areas where we store fat in the body and how that affects your health. And I think you'll be very surprised at these three what are called fat depots. Dr. Robert Lustig, who's in the functional medicine space and is a colleague, was talking about this, and I found it really fascinating, and I think it'll give you a new perspective of what to work on as far as addressing ideal health. So there's three places you can store fat. One is what's called subcutaneous. That just means sub, underneath, cutaneous is skin. So that's the fat you can see. And of course that's the fat we don't like because we can see it. But it turns out that you have to have a fair bit of that gained before it'll overwhelm your body enough to cause ill health. So that's really what we're discussing. So the large butt, the large thighs, this is sort of stable weight. Whether you like the appearance or not is something else, but it's stable weight, and it isn't until you've gained about 10 kilos, which is the same as 22 pounds of too much, that it overflows into your circulation and can start overburdening your body. But up to this about 22 pounds level, your body can deal with it, and it's not creating a lot of inflammation and things that are going to affect your health long term, as far as creating disease, heart disease, diabetes, etc. All those diseases we're trying to avoid. So that's the subcutaneous that you can see. That's fat depot number one. Fat depot number two is visceral fat. So that's fat, that's belly fat basically. And what we know about belly fat is that it's not stable like the fat in the butt or the thighs, but this is fat that's going to start infiltrating around your organs. And this is due to stress. And as we have chronic stress. Now there's acute stress, which is something happened, it's pretty short-lived. You know, maybe you're driving, somebody cuts you off, you're almost in an accident, and then you exhale and say, oh, okay, that was close. That acute stress actually helps you burn fat. It's the chronic stress that leads to the fat deposition in the belly that is then leading toward ill health. And you only need 5 pounds of this, the belly fat, the visceral fat, to then start affecting your health in a negative way through the cascade of inflammation leading to heart disease, diabetes, of course obesity itself, loss of cognition, autoimmune disease, the whole list of diseases, the majority of which are the #1 killers of American citizens, and that have inflammation as its source. So only 5 pounds of visceral fat due to stress. So we're going to come back to what we should do about it in a moment. I just want to get into the third fat depot, and that is liver fat. So this comes from alcohol consumption, sugar consumption, highly processed foods. This overwhelms the liver. Now, we talked about 22 pounds subcutaneous. We talked about 5 pounds visceral belly weight. With the liver, it's only half a pound. That's very, very small amount. But that's the amount that then overwhelms your liver and then leads to this inflammatory cascade. So the liver is very sensitive to too much fat. I was listening to a clinician who was mentioning that up to 20% of our children have on the way to fatty liver. So they have too much fat deposition in their liver. And if you think about not the alcohol part, but the sugar part, that makes sense because our children are 65–70% of their calories come from processed foods, much of which is sugar. So that makes sense. So what do we need to look at as far as solutions to this? Let's go back to the visceral fat, right? The belly fat. associated with stress. We talked about chronic stress. So assessing where your chronic stress is coming from, and this can be, this can be obvious things in life, but also being causative about how I can change these things. You're more at cause than you think, so you might think, okay, the job is stressful and I need a job. Fair enough, but if you can maybe sit down with a friend, somebody who you really respect, that has a great ear and you feel, knows you well, you really need that other person to bounce ideas off, to see what you can do to make a change. So, my boss is very demanding. You can go down that road and say, okay, what are the demands, and how can I try to meet those demands? How can I talk to somebody about, you have to get creative. I'm not going to solve every problem here. But the thing I wanted to talk to you about regarding stress are some levels of stress you might not even appreciate. One very important one is your sleep status, your sleep hygiene, and what kind of restorative or lack thereof sleep you're getting. So there are, there's Apple Watches, there's Whoop bands, that's what I wear. The Whoop band honestly changed my life, and I'm not here to recommend a specific product, but my son liked it, so I got it, and I didn't like it at first because, of course, I didn't like what it was telling me. It was telling me I was getting terrible sleep, even though I'm like, okay, I gave it 8 hours. What more do you want from me? But it turns out that my quality was not good, and it was a big source of stress to my body. So whether it's a glucose monitor that you just do for a month, or you get an Apple Watch, or some sort of tracker that gives you some idea about your sleep quality, that will go a long way to start deciphering. So I noticed that when I get a little bit more than 8 hours sleep, actually, which I thought was very indulgent, but my body does better with that. Some people don't need as much, but you'll learn your own rhythm. When I exercise, which I do regularly, that gives me a good overall score. So there's a lot of things that feed into it, but it is very well worth your while to figure out for you these sources of stress, so you're not in this fight or flight situation. Now, those of you who know my channel well know that I have a specialty here at the clinic with my team on hiatal hernia syndrome. That has a facet that will definitely put you in fight or flight and alter sleep, therefore can increase belly fat through this hormone cortisol, the stress hormone. So here at the clinic, of course, we can also help on a deeper level of why you may be in this situation of high cortisol, the stress hormone associated with chronic stress that's leading to the visceral, belly fat, and impacting your health. I know that was a lot of, cascades there, but you can rewind me and listen to this again. Now let's go on to the liver fat, which is extremely sensitive, right? Only half a pound of fat can overwhelm the liver and then cause this cascade of inflammation that is absolutely going to damage your health. So what do we do about that? Well, there's alcohol, sugar are the major impacts to the liver, and this does include, unfortunately, artificial sweeteners, if you're a big fan of those. I'm still an advocate for stevia. It's a plant. It's not artificial, actually, but it is that 0 calorie. So I think personally, and I don't have any research that's gotten in the way of my opinion yet, that stevia is a safe alternative, but the kinds of things in Diet Coke, etc. And there's an interesting study from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, where they talked about the toxicity of one Coke was equivalent to the toxic level, again, overburdening the liver, of 2 Diet Cokes. So you go, oh, that's great. Well, they're both toxic. And then what they found out is because people were drinking the 0 calorie, instead of, 1 or 2 Cokes, they were, consuming 4 to 5 Diet Cokes. So now the toxicity level is really high, because one Coke is extremely toxic with how much sugar it's going to overburden your liver with. And so 2 Diet Cokes is something that people do pretty regularly, and those are equivalent. So you do want to assess not just your sugar consumption, but your diet sweetener consumption as well. So hopefully this gave you some food for thought, and it's not to say we're not talking about diet at all, because we are, but on the really impactful areas of what your scale doesn't tell you. There's also the concept of skinny fat, meaning somebody can be very happy with what their scale says, but they still have too much visceral fat. Again, it's the fat you can't see. So a little insidious. We here at the clinic, we have a BIA machine, so it's like a scale, but you also have electrodes that you hold onto with your hands, and it gives you your body fat distribution, how much muscle mass you have, bone density, et cetera, et cetera. Sorry, bone amount, not bone density. That's a different study. But it gives you a really nice overview, and so we have that here at the clinic if you're local. But if you're having trouble in this area and just say, wow, I have belly fat and I just really can't get a handle on my stress load, and internal or not. So sometimes stress is from the outside, sometimes it's coming from the inside. So if you need assistance, that's what we're here for. So please reach out. If you like the information on this channel, please subscribe. That's how more people get to see it. So give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and we'll talk soon.